guys already know this is your boy Dance God Lloyd, and you are listening to the Science Digest show on Odadie Radio. You know the vibes. Click on the like button, subscribe, and share. Let's go.
Hello, my name is Elsie Kaufman, and I'm here to support the Science Digest show on YouTube. They have a lot of interviews, interesting things going on. Please watch it. Thank you.
For more updates on science, technology, and innovation, why don't you go onto YouTube and watch the Science Digest show? That's the best show on YouTube.
Hi there. So to all my lovely people who love science and anything science, well, the Science Digest show has got you sorted to kindly hop onto their YouTube channel, subscribe, and let's learn anything and everything science. Science Digest show, demystifying science.
My name is Dr. Yabidi Akon, Research Fellow at the West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens at the University of Ghana. The Science Digest show is an informative program that explores issues of scientific relevance in Ghana. So I encourage everybody to watch it for up-to-date information and updates on any area of science as it applies, as it's relevant to Ghana.
I'm a medical doctor. I encourage you to watch Science Digest on YouTube. Let us demystify science. Thank you.
My name is Professor Gordon Awandare. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at the University of Ghana and the Founding Director of WACBIP, West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens. I love the Science Digest show. Keep watching and supporting the show. You can follow them on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Salasi, Prosecco SMQ 2019. And one of the first beneficiaries of the Science Digest show. I'd like to recommend the Science Digest show for everyone because it's one of the only educative shows that's entertaining at the same time. It's very, very captivating and teaches you a lot. Very, very good for high school kids and even like students above high school level. Thank you.
Hey guys, you already know this is your boy Dance God Lloyd, and this is the Science Digest show. We did demystify the science. You know the vibes are there inside. Boy,
break up. Still not break up. Only God. Yeah, I know that. No. That's right. Highly spiritual. And rain you mere. Shia Yeshua Hamashia. Says it's coming down today to perform a miracle for you and I. Namizaya me atam nana. Senka me bonia shamema. Very far from the mercy, but she give him the opportunity to worship your majesty, to eternity, to the Holy Trinity. Angels are singing, seraphim and cherubim. Hey,
hello, Akwaba, and welcome to the Science Digest show live on Odadie Radio. My name is Adam Nana, and you're welcome to the show. Today we have an interesting session, of course, as usual. And today's topic is an amazing one. The STEM Convo. I'm sure you're wondering what STEM is all about. Today everything will be demystified. On the show today, my co-hosts are in the person of
Selinam Moti.
Okay, welcome Selinam.
Thank you very much.
And hello, Love. Welcome to the show. Our guest, you're welcome. Thank you too. Our guest today on the show is an amazing lady. I'm sure when you see her face, you know that yes, she is an interesting person, of course, and a famous person too. In the person of Madam Evelyn Ajipon. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll begin shortly with an intro of yourself.
Okay. Where do I start?
Anywhere.
I think most people know me currently as the quiz mistress of the Sharks, which is a TV3 quiz show. We're in season 6. In fact, we just finished the finals yesterday for season 6. I joined them in season 4. That's where most people will know the face from, I guess. But in my day-to-day, I'm actually an educator. So education consultancy is what I do. I have a kind of mottled journey with Ghana. I'm Ghanaian. Both parents are Ghanaian from the Ashanti region. I was born in the UK. I came to Ghana at 2.5 years old. My primary and 2 years of secondary education were in Ghana, and then we went back to the UK. And then I returned in 2017. So that's kind of my journey with Ghana. And in the interim, I was back and forth anyway. I visited regularly. So I had a love, interestingly, I started with a love of engineering.
Okay.
My maternal grandfather was a self-taught mechanic. And so when we went to visit with him, they used to be in Dunkwa Onofe. He would be repairing motorbikes. And because I had an interest, I'll be sitting next to him. And then usually when he'd put everything together and he wanted to test it out, he would say, Mami Eje Betinamichi, which is, my name is Mami Eje, so he'd say Betinamichi. And my earliest memories are of driving a motorbike at high speed through the roads in Dunkwa Onofe with no helmet or anything. When I think of the safety aspects, it's really weird, but absolutely loved it. And I guess I developed a love of engines then.
Okay.
I remember once explaining to my dad, just a conversation, I can't remember how it came about. And he asked what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to be, in fact, at the time I said I wanted to be a mechanic. It didn't go that well. He found it very weird that a girl wanted to be a mechanic. And I think that kind of stuck with me a bit. So because of that, I put myself off the idea of going into engineering. I still ended up in the science field, but I did not do engineering. Do I regret it? No. I think everything happens by design, but that's how I came into the STEM area. So I've been a bit back and forth. My adult life was in the UK. I married, had a child, went into teaching after doing an undergrad in biotechnology as far back as 1993 I graduated from the University College London. And before that, I did a HND in Applied and Industrial Biology at London South Bank University. And the reason why I did a HND before I did a BSc is because I flunked my A-levels. And I hated it so much, I knew I didn't want to go back and do it. And I've kind of worked out, as I've gotten older, that my learning style is not exams. I'm one of those that needs project-based learning and research and that kind of stuff. So the HND worked really well for me, and I went from thinking my life was over when I messed my A-levels up to really excelling at the HND. So much so that when I applied for the degree, I got a first-year exemption and went straight into the second year of the degree at University College and did biotech. We were the first group to do biotechnology at UCL. So graduated UCL in 1993. The one thing it taught me, as much as I love science, I didn't want to stay in the lab. And biotech, at that time, you had to stay in the lab. There wasn't any kind of science for public understanding, going out and meeting people. And I figured, okay, I've got this degree, but I really don't want to go into a lab, so what do I do? And a really good friend of mine said, you know, you're always explaining, I was full of mindless facts, because I read a lot, and I'm a huge quizzer. That brings us back to the quiz. I'm a massive quizzer, so my whole family knows me for this. I have a massive vocabulary, because my dad used to let me read the dictionary when I was young. And so my friend, you're always full of facts. You're always telling us things that we don't know and explaining things to us. Have you thought of teaching? And I was like, no. He was like, well, work in a school for a while and see if that's what you want to do. And that's how I actually came into education. So I went into a private school in London as a biology technician. Did that for 2 years. They were really good at supporting you for your career path. So I remember having an appraisal meeting and them saying, are you interested in teaching? And me saying, yes, because I used to help a lot in the labs with their learners. And they supported me. They actually sponsored me through my teacher training for 2 years.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then I qualified as a teacher and started teaching in 1997. as a science teacher. And I taught in 6 different schools in London over my time teaching in the UK. That's from 1997 to 2017 when I relocated back to Ghana. And so biology specialism, biology, chemistry, not much physics, but I do teach physics at the younger age, lower secondary. And I went into, I think being a bit of a bossy boots and being quite confident, I went into education management very quickly. So I qualified a bit late as a teacher relative to others. I was 27. And I had my first managerial role at 29.
Wow.
So I became a department, Key Stage 3 department. It gets complicated, but lower secondary science coordinator in the school I was in at 29. And then head of science at 31. And then head of science with whole school responsibility at 33.
Wow.
And then assistant head in a different school at 35. And then kind of stayed in leadership, mentoring teachers in training. I did that for about 16 years, actually. Because in the UK, the teacher training program, you spend 70% of your time in school and then 30% in university. And so I did my teacher training at King's College London, and they have a really good alumni where you support the uni when you finish. So I sat on interview panels for postgraduate certificate of education prospective students, and also became a mentor for teachers in training who were in schools. So I did that for years and years before I came down. And then for whatever reason, the love of Ghana kept pulling me back. And so I made a decision probably as far back as 2009 to actually come back.
Wow.
But my daughter was still schooling. And when I came to Ghana, I wanted her to do the IGCSE so that she could go back to the UK if she wanted to, being a British-born child. And the fees in Ghana were not small, let's put it that way. So we decided then we'll stay until she got into university. And so I put it off. And when she started uni, after her second year, I decided I will relocate to Ghana. And I came to what we call a soft London. I came to a job. So I came to a salary job as an education director in the private school here. Did that for 3 years. COVID hit, all of that. And during COVID's time, went through a bit of lots of epiphanies to kind of make up my mind what I wanted to do with my life. And I loved being in Ghana, but I thought part of the reason why I had come back to Ghana was to make a difference. And I was lucky enough that before I even came, I'd met a wonderful gentleman called Grant Bulmio, who runs a company called Neogenics Education. And he'd employed me to be part of the teacher trainers and be involved in that aspect. So I realized that there was a love of also teaching adults in education. And so I decided to kind of set up my own consultancy. So currently that's my main job, is that I work with private schools, usually those following the British curriculum, and I train their teachers and I support their leadership.
Amazing.
That's what I currently do.
Wow.
So that's me.
Oh, amazing. A nice trajectory you've given us. And I'm inspired by your journey.
Okay, that's good.
For not giving up on academics.
The love is weird because it's through this friend, and she's a dear friend. She's actually one of my travel friends. My other love is traveling. I love to travel. And Aggie clearly knew me well enough to say, try this. And it wasn't something that I thought about ever, but I found myself in there. Now I'm extremely passionate about education.
Awesome.
So that's how it works out. Who knows?
What's the name of this consultancy?
It's called Chrysalis Education Consultancy. Very tiny.
Okay.
Very small.
Why that name?
Okay. That's where my sciencey bit comes in again. The chrysalis is one of the stages of a butterfly's life cycle.
Okay.
And a chrysalis is what is formed just before you get the butterfly. So the concept in my head was that you are trying to make butterflies out of people. And so you are the chrysalis, you're the one that is supporting the growth and everything so that they burst out to their butterfly stage.
Okay, so like Some form of metamorphosis.
That's exactly it. It's metamorphosis, indeed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My co-host will have some questions for you.
I'm sure he will. I can see him looking at me thinking, I've got lots to say.
I know, right?
So,
Love in the US, I'm sure you also have questions. So after Selassie, Celine, I'm sorry.
So what mainly caught my attention in the course of when you're speaking was the fact that you said you weren't someone who learned based on exams.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not really appreciated in Ghana.
No, I know it isn't. So in a way, it's a good thing my parents took me to the UK. Because if they left me here, I don't think I'll be here where I am now, in all honesty. No, I don't think I would have done. I think I would have given up after the equivalent of the WASI, I think. Because there was no other pathway. Whereas in the UK, there were many other pathways. So when I didn't do so well in my A-levels, obviously the universities you chose you can't get into because you haven't made a grade. And I kind of thought my whole life had fallen apart at this point. I cried for days. Really, I think I was in a bit of a depression, to be honest with you. And my mother came in one day and said, okay, so, with all this crying, what else are we going to do? You need to go and get some help. That's how she put it. And I don't know if it was her suggestion or whether I went back to school to ask for help. I don't know how it worked out, but there was a careers advice center in one of our local libraries. And so I went there and said, my life is over, help me. And they said, how old are you? And because when I went to the UK, I went back a year. So instead of going into year 9, which would have been equivalent of JHS 3, I went to JHS 2.
Okay.
That made me a bit older than my compatriots. So I was 20 going on 21. And that worked in my favor because you can go into tertiary institutions with not the best qualifications as a mature student at 21. And they manipulated the data in some way that you don't have to be 21. You have to be in your 21st year to go into tertiary education. So that's how I ended up with the HND course. So they gave me the options, what's your interest, etc., etc. And then I went and interviewed. At London South Bank University and University of East London. And it's interesting. My course director was called, and I've got to try and remember his name, I think it was Tom Higgs. And he was so friendly. I remember that very well. The interview was really, really friendly. And it was almost like a conversation. It wasn't an interview. It was like, okay, so what are your interests in science? Which aspects of science do you like? We had a huge conversation. And then after a while, I could see the conversation was going towards, so when you join us, this is what you'll be doing. And I thought, I'm in, right? Yeah. And I walked away and he said, you get a letter from us within a week. And I did. I got a letter basically saying, welcome to London South Bank University. And I was like, wow. And it was like you'd got a second chance, right? So I went all guns blazing and I was very conscientious, and I've kind of stayed conscientious since then to make sure that I did really, really well. Because I wanted to make everyone proud, almost like you've lost a chance and then you get it. Yeah. So I think here we need to kind of start looking at that different learning styles. Yeah. Because I've come as far as getting an MA. Oh, I forgot to mention the MA. Right. One of the institutions I worked for sponsored me through my MA. You see how much blessings I've had. So I was sponsored through my PGC, Postgraduate Certificate in Education, and I was also sponsored through my MA in Education. Because then I was in education, and I did my MA as a mature student. It was action research. I didn't have to do any exams. 6 portfolios and a thesis, and I got my MA in education from London South Bank. So I started in London South Bank, went to UCL to do my BSc, went to King's to do my postgraduate in education, and then went back to London South Bank to do my MA in education. So, yeah, so to get this far without necessarily being a huge academician, I'm one of those that I don't think I'm the brightest person in the room, but I'm knowledgeable. And if I'm interested in something, I read a lot about it. I'm not naturally gifted academically, I don't think. I have to be quite honest with myself, but I'm hardworking and I'm conscientious, and I think that has brought me so far because of that. Okay. So, yes, I think we need to change the script in Ghana to allow learners who have an interest in something, who are not necessarily academic and can't get the A's and the 1s and whatever, to still be able to follow their path. And I think that's something that's lacking in our system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you suggest that will be implemented?
I think it exists, but we don't join it up properly because we have the TVET route. Vocational is spoken about a lot, but sometimes it's spoken about almost like the bad second cousin to the academics. Almost like if you do vocational, it means your life was over and you just choose that as an option. But without vocations, where would we be? We won't have our caterers, we won't have our seamstresses that we all go to make our clothes for us. Those who repair our cars, they've all come through that route where they've either done it through watching others as apprenticeships or being self-taught or whatever. And we do need them because they're the ones that will make the table you sit on, the chairs you sit on. All of that is vocational routes. And we just need to. I know, for example, the German system and even the UK has a BTEC that goes to level 7, which is the equivalent of a master's, but it's a vocational route. And it's mainly portfolio practical work, so that the examination aspect isn't huge for those who struggle with that system. So it's here, it's just the joining up that is the problem. So in a UK secondary school, and we go through from year 7, which is Form 1, the old system, to 6th form, and you can start doing a BTEC diploma or certificate in year 9, which is year 14 years old. And you can do that in conjunction with doing the traditional GCSEs or O-levels as they were called. So you can have a child who comes out and they've got qualifications at GCSE, which are very academic, but also parallel to that, they have BTECs, HNDs and whatever, not HNDs, but certificates at that level. And they can follow whichever pathway they got. And it's recognized at the tertiary institutions. You can go in and do degrees with it, etc. So I think that's what we need to do here, is the marrying up that we haven't done so well. It does exist, but it's just not sold very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I think here is where I crack a joke. I believe in Hess's law.
Okay.
And I think it's independent of the path taken, the enthalpy change will remain the same.
Indeed.
So as you're rightly saying that we have parallel approaches in where you trained or where you grew up, maybe we can copy suit or assimilate that here.
Indeed.
Such that if you plan A doesn't work, there's a plan B,
Indeed.
a plan C, and it should send you to your destination.
Indeed.
No matter what happens. Like an Uber driver sort of.
Indeed. And there's a lot of people in our system who are walking around feeling that they've not achieved anything. Purely because they didn't have the right options. And that's my sadness, is that you get a lot of people, they drop out of school for whatever reason, and there's no pathway to come back. It becomes very challenging for it to be looked upon. And we're kind of fixated with the best degrees, whatever the best degree is by definition, I don't know. And you know, everyone wants a child who's a doctor, an engineer, you know, the traditional old jobs. But all research is currently telling us those old jobs are shrinking, and we actually need to think differently, because we're training people your age for jobs that are yet to come. We don't even know what those jobs are. So we just need to make you resilient and flexible enough to be able to step into any job. Is that flexibility that we're trying to get. So I think that's what we need to really start thinking about.
Interesting. To be future ready, eh?
We have to be future ready, very much so. Yeah.
Sure. Love in the US. Any questions for our guest?
I think you have quite an enviable journey.
Oh, really? It was painful at points, but
From, I don't know, but I think this is what we all aspire to be. But, it's quite a journey. And thank you. Literally like a role model to whoever looking up to you, knowing that at least they can start somewhere and they'll get somewhere eventually.
Yeah.
So I know you talked a little bit about the learning mechanisms, and I was hoping if you can give a specific style. Probably it won't be one size fit all, but if you can give an example so that others can actually build on it or find what works best for them.
Okay. Now, obviously, having studied education, there is a whole area of literature on learning styles. The most obvious one is the VAKs, which is visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners. And some people need to see what they are learning in order to understand it. Some people need to hear it in order to understand it. And then the hands-on They need to be able to actually put their hands on something, try it out. They'll be your deconstructors and your reconstructors, and that's how they learn. So abstract concepts have to be made almost physical for them to appreciate how they learn about it. Then obviously it's also to do with how you retain information. All the research currently says you retain information if you are part of the learning process. You're not sitting there and just listening. You are acting on it. And I think that's what will bring us to this STEM conversation that we're talking about, because the fact that STEM has become such a big deal right now is because science, technology, engineering, maths tend to be these hands-on realization of abstract concepts. So most of what we learn in science, we don't see. Or if we see it very slowly. So even in biology, if you talk about a plant growing, it takes time for it to grow. And you don't sit there and watch it grow. You know, you kind of put the seed down. A few days, you come back, something is sprouted. Then you leave it a few days, you come back, you've got a seedling, and so on. Now with technology, you know, you can do time-lapse photography or video, and you can make it fast, see the growth process. And so really, when you talk about learning styles, what I've come to realize as an adult is that I was never one for the traditional classroom, which is teacher at the front, sage of all knowledge, pouring information into learners, we writing, you know, copiously, then going away, reading over those very same notes, and then coming and being asked questions on the information that has been given to you. I realized that is not my way of working. And I think, in fact, I have made a conscious choice as a teacher not to teach in that way, because I knew that's not how I learned. And that made me really enjoy teaching, and I think a lot of my students appreciated me as a teacher for that reason. I was willing sometimes even to sit back and say, okay, it's your turn to teach this. And I think that's what I mean by learning styles. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more love? Oh, yeah, fine for now. Hello, love. Any more questions or comments?
I think that would be it.
Wow, all right. Okay, viewers, you're still watching the Science Digest show. We are live on Odadie Radio. Odadie Radio can be reached on Facebook at Odadie Radio and also at Odadie Radio Ghana, on Twitter at Odadie Radio, on WhatsApp on the number 02000092925, and then the studio line is 0302551014. We are also supported and powered by SMC Consult, So Much for Christ, EPP Books Services, located opposite the Legon main entrance on the second floor of the high-rise building of the Legon City Mall. Stick around, stick and stay. We'll be right back to delve deeply into what we call the STEM Convo.
My name is Sohiniba Kosiachewa, your Miss Agriculture Ghana. And keep watching Science Digest Show. Keep watching Science Digest Show. This is where you get up-to-date information on everything happening in the agribusiness sector. You know, right? That is where the money is. There is gold in the soil. Science Digest Show is the best. Subscribe and get all the info. We love you. Hooah.
Always remember.
Welcome back to the Science Digest show, and we are live on Odadie Radio, powered by SMC Consult. Science Digest show is also supported by EPP Books Services. Today's edition of the show has an interesting topic, the STEM Convo. But before we delve deep into that, happy belated birthday, or belated happy birthday, of course, to my producer DJ Use, that is Mr. Joseph O2, who is always doing the wonderful works for us. We wish you a blessed happy birthday. Also to our partner in crime, Dr. Joseph, another Joseph, AJ Annan. He's based in UK now. He's an optometrist and a daddy, of course. Happy belated happy birthday to you. And then also to Madam Frida Cranton, who is an also from Mame. God richly bless you for all the support over the decades. Now to the very topic, the STEM Convo. What and why STEM? What is STEM and why STEM?
This conversation has been going on for years, hasn't it? Really, let's be honest.
Right?
Science, technology, engineering, and maths, shortened to STEM. Not the stem of a plant, but perhaps a stem in some way.
Good one there.
Indeed. We've talked about it. We keep saying STEM subjects, STEM subjects, STEM subjects, but I wonder whether we're doing too much talking and not really embedding it in what we do in a day-to-day. I would add an A to it.
Okay.
The STEAM. Because without the arts, the sciences can't get where they're going to. I use the example of Crick and Watson.
Okay.
Right? I think one of them was asked how they came up with the structure of DNA. And he said it came to him in a dream. Right? And he was describing it as the movement of the Hippocratic Oath sign for doctors. And they'd been sitting in the lab trying to work out how the structure could possibly have come together. And they'd done all their enemas and their spectroscopy, they've done everything. And somehow it literally came to him in a dream. I will argue that it wasn't necessarily a dream. It's to do with the exposure. Right? So if you open your mind and you look at everything as being amazing, rather than just focusing in on all that you want to do or what you want to do, then you're more likely to be successful wherever you sit. So I think the arts do that. Was it yesterday or the day before? I don't watch much TV. Actually, I watch very little TV. But usually my TV is on, muted. And I happened to be in Tamale. I remember explaining to you. And the hostel I was in, not a hostel, a guest house I was in, have DSTV, which I don't have at home. And they were doing something about football. And I've forgotten the guy's name. I can see his face, but I've forgotten his name. And he was giving a history of how he became a footballer, etc., etc. And he talked about the fact that really the reason why he was so fast and light on his feet as a footballer was because when he was going through school, he had to do gymnastics and ballet.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, wow, I wish this is sold more. Because in Ghana, if you say your child does ballet, firstly, it's only the girls, and they wear these tutus, and they walk around on tippy toes pretending. But actually, ballet is a huge art form, requiring a lot of muscle strength, etc., etc. And then look at the transfer between somebody who's doing ballet to being a world-class footballer. But I think a lot of times we put things in lanes, and we don't want to allow any crossover. And I think the reason why STEM is pushed, in fact, the root reason why STEM has always been pushed, is because the way in which you become a successful STEM student or graduate is that you have to realize what you're learning abstractly in a book. It has to make sense enough for you to develop an interest in it, to be able to transfer that to other things. So in different jurisdictions, I think maybe even in Switzerland, France, you have to study science all the way to the age of 18. You don't get to choose that you don't want to study it. UK is up to the age of 16. You have to study science. And I think we should not ever limit anybody studying the sciences, because I think the skills you need to understand science are so transferable to other things. And I think that is the reason for this STEM talk, is that STEM has been pushed because they know generally that people who do STEM subjects for a very long time seem to be most successful in their learning journey. Mm-hmm. And actually it's the way in which we learn STEM that makes them successful in their learning journey. And I think that's something that we need to be focusing on more so than the outcome of what we define STEM to be, which currently now becomes in almost in a way a kind of lip service to what STEM actually is. Okay. So there's a lot of outcome things that we do, the robotics, the VR things, the AI, all those kind of conversations that bring a kind of a wild thing that sometimes excludes others actually from it, when the reality is actually the way in which you learn when you are somebody coming from a STEM field is what makes you a better learner.
Okay.
I think that's what it is.
Amazing.
I'm hoping that's kind of answered.
Yeah. It sets the tone for further conversations on the Convo.
Indeed.
Telling them any questions. No. Okay, love. Your takes? Any questions?
Well, when it comes to STEM, I feel like it's stereotypically, we always see the male figure, like
Ah.
associated with
Okay, yes.
STEM.
Yeah.
That's why we called you from US.
It's rather ridiculous because I feel like females, despite the fact that we are not many out there, or there are not many females in the STEM field, we are almost, or we are par with our male counterpart. But for some reason, we are not being pushed out there for the other young girls or other young females to see that other people are doing it and that they can do it. So for me, I think we have to find a way to push this agenda that the STEM is not like a male-based thing, that females can also do it. That's my only take. So I'm just wondering, how do we bridge the gap? Like, how do we do it? How do we make it so that we have more females in this field? Because as of now, it's more of a male thing.
Yeah, I mean, we could reverse that argument and say, why do we have so many female nurses and not male nurses? Is that kind of traditionalism of certain jobs and certain roles? If you recall, when I was giving my kind of life history so far, I talked about the fact that I was interested in being a mechanic and discouraged. It's just we have these traditional concepts of what roles and what jobs go with particular subject areas. And I think that science and maths have always been supposedly the stronghold of males. If you look back as far back as Aristotle, Pythagoras, Socrates, all of them, the males in society got more of a say in this thing because apparently the women in the kitchen cooking food and whatever, right? So I think we have to have the conversation, but we have to have it differently, in all honesty, because no matter what we say, no matter how we look at it, boys are brought up differently to girls. So until we get to a point where we change the way we even bring them up, that's this conversation is going to continue. And so what we need really are the role models getting in right at the chalk face. I would like, as an educator, to see more males teaching preschool. I would like to see more science teachers teaching chemistry and physics who are female. I would like to see mothers buying tracks for their daughters rather than dolls for their daughters. There's so many things that we have to intentionally change in order to open certain doors for the girls to come in. Boys, by the time they get to 14, 15, have a huge amount of confidence that girls generally don't. And so even if they don't know, they will talk like they do know. A girl will focus in on what she doesn't know. And so that becomes that challenge. And that's where really we, those scientists that have found ourselves in this space, have to really try and push that conversation and push it differently. And the change has to come from each one of us making a change and bigging up, for want of a better expression, the females that are in that space, supporting them, clapping for them, giving them mentions, and giving them the room to have the conversation in a way that females have conversations, which is very different to the way males have conversations. And so for women to show up in STEM, what we can't do is try and say we need to compete with the men. We've just got to carve our own path. That's the way I look at it. I don't think it's about, women are equally as strong and therefore we need to be in the space of where men are. Why don't we create our own space? If we create our own space, guess what? If we're doing it right, they'll come looking for us anyway. That's the way I look at it.
Any more, love?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. Sure. Selena, you want to come in? Okay.
So, as a student, I have conversations with some of my mates, and for the STEM subjects, they see it as subjects where they have to memorize and pour everything they've learned on a sheet of paper and doing an exam. They don't seem to relate to what they are learning. So,
have you ever gone deep enough and asked them why they've chosen STEM subjects?
no, exactly.
I bet if you ask them, you find that most of those decisions haven't come from them. And that's part of the reason why they then don't ask the questions the way they're supposed to ask them. If you've chosen to do something, you have an interest in it, a real interest in it. And therefore, you learn the definitions, but you want to know why the definition. And science is about learning certain facts. We've learned this is the phenomenon as it stands, or this is the theory as it stands. Until somebody can find evidence to debunk what we know, this is how it goes. But as to the why, then most people don't understand. So I can, you're right. I find a lot of people find themselves in those spaces because there's a hierarchy of learning. And there's certain subjects that are right at the bottom and certain subjects that are right at the top. I will guarantee maths and physics are right at the top. And then you find at the bottom will be arts, visual arts. It's looked down upon. The skill required to draw. If you see an artist at work, it's amazing. It's mind-blowing. But we sometimes look down on those things without understanding that actually it's just a different skill set to this skill set. And so many people find themselves in the STEM phase and space because they've been told from a young age, oh, you're bright, you're really good, you'll be a doctor or you'll be an engineer. So they follow that path without not necessarily becoming part of it. So I think the next step in your conversations with your friends will be to say, why did you study? And you'll be amazed at some of the answers you get. They won't be able to tell you. Because if somebody enjoys something, they'll be able to give you a reason why they enjoy something. And if they can't tell you, it's usually because they've been made to believe it is really hard, and if you can do it, then you're brilliant. Do you see the points I'm trying to make? So the definitions, etc., I've always said to all the learners that I used to teach that in order to understand the definition, you have to understand the science. Don't just learn the definition and pour it. Because if you're sitting in an exam, and some of us don't do exams very well, and your brain goes blank, you need to be able to understand why photosynthesis. Because if I understand why photosynthesis, I'm probably going to be able to write something down, rather than photosynthesis is defined as carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of sunlight, chloroplast present, producing oxygen and water, right? I need to be able to understand why it goes like that. Do you see what I mean? I'm sure I've defined that wrong, but you know what I mean. It's what is going in and what is coming out. And really, what is coming out, the purpose of photosynthesis is to create food. So it was sugar at the end. That's what it was. Sugar and oxygen. Great. Right? But you see, because I understood it, I was even able to self-correct. Do you see what I mean? It's what is going in? How is it going in? Why do plants need water? Why are plants useful for us? Because they're removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere so that we don't end up with greenhouse gases, as is a problem now. Why are we useful to plants? We are actually breathing out the carbon dioxide they need in order to create the food that we're going to eat. So if you understand that, if you're sitting in an exam and you're asking to define or fill in the gap, you're not likely to forget. And so if you're doing the chew, pour, pass, forget, it will take you so far, but you get to a point where when you've now got to do the application, which is expected of you at tertiary level, you may find yourself wanting. So I think the conversation has to be different, right? And in fact, some of our teachers also fail our learners. It's all about, you must know this, you must get a certain percentage, you must do this, you must do that. And we rate learners who are very good at recalling information, etc., rather than the ones who are questioning. In fact, the ones who are questioning are the ones who are probably the better thinkers. And they're the ones that we should give space for, really. There you go.
Okay, another one. Are you done? All right. Love, do you have another question as of now?
Sure. This is just outside the phone, but I was just wondering, if you had an opportunity to restructure the Ghanaian education system, what are you going to tackle first, or what would be your first major project?
Ooh, how political can I be here? This is where I need to be careful. All successful educational systems are apolitical. It is left to the educators to do it. that's how far as I'm going to go without getting myself in trouble. But the reality is we keep talking about the Finnish system. We keep talking about the Singaporean system. We keep talking about the Chinese system. Even Mauritius is now coming up. We talk about them. And the root of it is if you go to Finland, everybody who's in the education system and is an educator is master's level. You cannot teach in Finland unless you've got a master's in education. And they put their best educators, this is the bit that's going to shock people, at preschool. Right? Those who got the best grades in their masters are the preschool teachers. And there's a perfect balance between male and female teachers at that level. So already the role modeling is correct. Then decisions that are made about the Finnish education system is made by an education consortium that has nothing to do with politics. They make the decision, they make it for 5 years at a time, but they plan 20 years in advance. And then they go to the government, the education part of the government, and say, this is what we're planning to do, this is how much money we're going to need. And they sit, look at it a bit, okay, yeah, that's how we're going to go. So that's it. There is no real point scoring attached to education other than we want the best educated learners in our country doing the best we can for the system that we're in. Now, the Finnish system is unusual because Finland is quite monocultural. It's not got a great diversity mix. It's very Caucasian and very Nordic. It's a small country. So it works. But if you're going to make that comparison somewhere else, Ghana is extremely complicated, for example. We have huge number of languages in our country. We have massive, hypocrisies, prejudices around certain regions, certain languages, certain whatever. And that too can create its own issue, right? And then you've got to add into the equation, we don't leave things to run their course and look at the evidences before we make decisions. So we make a decision, it runs for about 3 or 4 years and we go, it's not working, and we change it. And in most systems, you need minimum 5 years for it to work, for you to see any outcomes. And you need to keep it going. And you notice I said Finland has a 20-year plan.
Yeah.
Would you believe if I told you Ghana has a 20-year plan? We have a beautiful document called the Education Something 2030. Amazing document. I mean, when I read it, I was blown away because it's, like I said, a beautiful document. But in practice, it isn't there. So we have these amazing ideas, but the accountability, implementation, check-in, and all of that is lost. So if you want to make that change, this is where we need to be brave and actually start making certain decisions outside of certain remits. I'm trying to be really, really diplomatic here, but you see what I'm trying to say. So I think in those changes that we want to make, they can't be immediate. They can't be in the lifetime of a government. In fact, they can't even be in the lifetime of 2 governments. And we've got to be willing to hand over the baton. Because we're patriots after all, aren't we? We want the best for the citizens, not for ourselves. So you want to be able to make decisions that will go on for generations and we can see. Because Finland didn't arrive where it arrived at just like that. These are decisions that were made 40, 50 years ago. Finland doesn't have private schools. That was very deliberate. So that there wasn't that hierarchy of, I'm making decisions for the masses, but my child is going to the best independent school in town. So you, the person making the decision, you're making decision for your child because your child is going to sit in those very classrooms where you're making decisions for them. And I think all of that makes a massive difference to how you think things through. Because we have a massive disparity in Ghana, no matter which way we look at it. You know, that child that has to cross a river, take off their shoes, be carried on somebody's back before they end up in a classroom where they've got to sit on bricks with a teacher who's writing not on a chalkboard but some paint on a wall, to children who are in first-class classrooms where they're doing blended learning, etc., in the same country. There's our challenge.
Love, are you okay?
I am. I was just thinking about the disparity. I just realized this is a big issue.
Yeah.
And when I asked the question, probably I was a little bit closed-minded, but listening to her, I realized we have issues on so many levels.
Yeah.
It goes way deeper than
Yeah.
we can imagine. And I'm pretty sure most of the laws that are in place, and we don't even have the infrastructure to begin with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was just thinking, how are we going to make this work? Because if we have to actually implement something that will be successful, we need to have everybody on the same math line.
Yeah.
Where we say go, we can all like be in the race. But here's the case: some people are way far behind, and I was just wondering how we're gonna do it.
If you think of the bigger picture, you're likely to get depressed and give up. So I think what you have to do is try and make the change in small corners and hope that it kind of rolls and a ripple effect out there. There's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot that is happening in small pockets. And as for policy and design and what have you, everything you want exists in Ghana. We have the best policies. Even our current curriculum is a beautiful curriculum. I'll be very honest with you. When I read it, I was blown away. And the difference is exactly what you said. Are we equipping people to be able to deliver on that beautiful document that we have written? I was lucky enough in 2014, I think that was the last curriculum change in the UK, to be part of a panel of scientists who were trying out the materials and the documents and the way they teach the science at Key Stage 3, which is 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And we were on this panel for 6 months. So this was before the curriculum even came out. So they give you some teaching materials, you go, you teach it, and then you report back. How did it work? Where were the children's challenges? Cognitive conflict? What can we change? What can we do differently? What should we use here? I happen to teach in inner London schools, except for one school. All the schools I taught in were inner London, so very diverse. So if you're designing an experiment and you're only talking about potatoes, can we use chapatis? Can we use... It was that nitty-gritty, right? In order to be able to be all-encompassing of all the learners that I was teaching. So we tried this out, and you go back, they give you a sit-in fee, which was beautiful as well, and travel expenses. And you go back, we sit in a wonderful space, and we have a discussion about how well these teaching materials worked before the curriculum was implemented. So already some of us teachers were on board because we were part of the process. And you're selling it to your colleagues already, saying this new curriculum is going to be amazing because we're going to be doing this instead of doing that. We're having those kinds of conversations already. So when the new curriculum came out, a lot of teachers already knew. They sold it very well. They engaged teachers on the ground very well. And what happened with the Ghanaian curriculum was, for want of a better expression, most of the writing was done somewhere, and then it was brought and said, here you are, this is this beautiful curriculum, get on with it. And a lot of the teachers were saying, but we don't have textbooks, okay? Which blew me away until I discovered that in some schools, they don't even get electricity. So you cannot be telling them they should be showing video clips or projecting something when they don't even have the facilities in order to do that. The children don't even have tables they're sitting on and chairs. So how then do you tell me that as an example of a practical, if I don't have the equipment, I can show them an animation of the internet? It doesn't marry. So therein lies our challenge, right? We have a lot of big brains in Ghana with amazing ideas. The doers are what are missing.
Interesting. Love, any more?
That'll be all.
That'll be all for now. All right. So you can find us on Twitter at Science Digest Show. You can also find us on TikTok at The Science Digest Show. On YouTube at Science Digest Show. Kindly like, subscribe, comment to our channel. We are also live on Odadie Radio. Odadie Radio can be found on Facebook at Odadie Radio Ghana or Odadie Radio. On Instagram and on Twitter at Odadie Radio. And then also our WhatsApp line is 02,092,925. We'll continue, but I want to bring in a tie-in from Love's first question about females gearing on in STEM. And I remember when GSS, one of my colleagues, and passed the comment that females are made to grow at an infantile stage with toys. When I talk about toys, it's about the dolls, and the males are giving the cars, the motors, stuff which are gearing towards science naturally.
Indeed.
Actually, this is what she said. The ladies are giving chobi, and then they'll just be combing the hair.
Yeah.
So, what's your take on that? Does it have a ripple effect on what happens
It
in
does.
later life?
It does. I think everywhere
As
we
an
find.
educationist,
Oh yeah, everywhere we are, we find that there is a branding that happens right from a baby all the way up. I told you I was in Tamale, and one of the things that I was training some teachers on, and I talked about some of the language they themselves use towards the children, whether it's appropriate or not. And I remember saying to them, we have this habit of saying to boys don't cry. You're a boy, why are you crying?
Why are you crying?
Only girls cry, right? I said that's the wrongest thing you can do to a boy, because then they internalize whatever issues they are having. And that's why we grow up and we end up in an environment where the suicide rate in boys is way, way higher than in girls. Because we women are brought up to be able to talk. And if we feel like crying, we cry. That should a boy do that, they're seen as being soft. In the same vein, it's about, putting boys in the kitchen. If a woman does that to the son, that's going to cause consternation in the family. But they've got to eat. So who's supposed to cook the food? Right? And the same with girls. If a girl is interested in books or cars, she's seen as odd. That's me. I still love cars. I still have a huge love of cars. And weirdly, it was a good connector between me and learners. My last school I was in for 6 years, and it was a boys' school.
Interesting.
And they were blown away by how much I knew about cars. And they actually connected me a lot to the students that I taught. And I was also the STEM lead in our school.
Okay.
So I was the one that used to take them on all the STEM trips. So I got to know the students very well. And it got to a point where I knew my sex and my color didn't matter. I was just somebody who was an enthusiast like them. And so, people will be trying to get to my STEM club, even though it was done on rotation. Sometimes they'll come on rotation and they're to move. They're like, I don't want to move, miss. I want to stay. That type of thing. Yeah. That's when you've keyed people in. But it was about getting them to appreciate the phenomenon that we're actually working with, rather than you're a boy, you can't do this, or you're a girl, you can't do this. And I think that is the challenge. We have to be very intentional about what we do with our children. If they're interested in a truck, let them play with a truck. If they're interested in a doll, let them play with a doll. Boy or girl, I don't think it's an issue. But a boy holding a doll in Ghana, anywhere actually, it will be seen as warped. Why are you holding a doll? But fathers hold babies, don't they? So why is that? Do you see my point? It's a very,
abomination.
Yes, exactly that. And why though? This is my point. Why though? I'm sitting here, my brother is a better cook than I am. And I see my mother as one of the first feminists that I came across, because both of us were in the kitchen. I'm cutting the onions, my brother is cutting the tomatoes. Much to the chagrin of my father, he did not like it at all. But my brother is a better cook than me. And I'll say it hands up, I don't like being in the kitchen. I cook to eat. I'm not somebody who's in the kitchen churning out dishes and dishes. It's not me, right? So just being able to appreciate that we should give them access to everything, so that you are not already discounting possibilities for them. I think it's a great thing. that we should work on. But it has to be conscious.
Okay.
And it has to be against the background of stereotypes.
All right. So I'm putting it to you directly. So if you have a baby girl right now and she's in the developmental stages, would you give her a robot to play with?
I did that with my daughter. I did it with my daughter.
Okay, so you didn't do the conventional stuff?
Nope.
No chobi?
Nope. I was very deliberate, but actually she's much more feminine than I am.
Okay.
So that experiment didn't work.
It didn't work.
She's very much a girly girl, but I think her thinking is actually very open.
Okay.
And perhaps in some ways quite masculine. But she ended up being into dance, the arts, you know, seen as a female kind of stay. Okay. But if you sit and have an intellectual conversation with her, you realize her thinking is a bit different. Deeper. It's not very much. She's quite an independent girl, etc., etc. And I think that is probably comes from my deliberateness in making sure that if she wanted me to buy her a truck, that's what I bought her. And I didn't just buy. In fact, I made a point of not buying her. Most of her dolls came from other people, not me. The only doll I bought for her was for her first trip in Ghana, which was about 4. I got her a black doll because I was very deliberate about getting her, you know, a very traditional dolls with the woolen hair. So it looked like her. I made a point of getting her that with her kente dress, and she loved that doll actually. So I remember that one. Yeah.
Interesting. Sweet mother.
Indeed.
We are also proudly supported by Hillbill Shoes. Hillbill Shoes make formidable shoes in Ghana. It will amaze you. And they are all over the place in the malls now, in Nalem shops. Hillbill Shoes can be found on social media, on Facebook at Hillbill Ghana, on Instagram at Hillbill Shoes, on Twitter at Hillbill_shoes. Also, Hillbill Shoes can be contacted on this very number, 024-349-2703. 024-349-2703. Hillbill Shoes, they make amazing leather shoes amidst other kind of shoes. Just contact them, check their social media handles, and you'll be amazed at what you find or see. All right, so we also hear, apart from STEM, you've made us know about STEAM.
Yes.
Recently, I also got to know about STEAMED with a D at the end.
And the D is for what?
And the person says the D is design.
Okay. That's in CAD/CAMs kind of thing.
But I felt the D and technology are in tandem.
Indeed, yeah.
Or what do you think as an educationist?
You know, when you go through life, you don't go through life with a separation of subjects, do you?
No.
You don't walk through life and go, I'm now going to do some maths because I'm buying something. Or I'm now going to do some English because I'm speaking. We go through life and we go through life. It's only schooling that somehow separates things into subject areas. And I think that's the thing that we need to teach across. In most places, you find your science teacher will only teach science. They will never talk about the history of science, for example. They will never talk about a book they've read that's a fiction book or something. They see small molecules. We don't really see, you know, electricity. We see evidence of them.
Okay.
And so I think when we talk about STEM and then we add in STEAM and then we're now adding in D, something else will come. And the reality is now we're talking about life, isn't it? Yeah. It's about the reality of life is you can't just be a science student and not have any experience of anything else. You may be a science student and a musician. You may be a science student and be an artist. You may be a science student and so and so. I heard the other day that there was a university that in order for you to go and do maths, you should have done music up to a certain grade. And it was something to do with rhythm and octaves and whatever, understanding of maths. But it's not something that we think about too often. We kind of assume everything is a standalone. And I think STEM, STEAM, all of that is to do with an amalgamation of what happens in life and how we go about understanding it. Yes. But we have to have labels because that's how, you know, we categorize as humans. And so I guess that's what it is. Okay. So with this theme, I think something else will come along. But the idea of STEAM, and I'm an advocate of STEAM because I explained to you I have a daughter who's very artsy. And I myself am a huge appreciator of artists.
Okay.
But I can't draw. But I have an understanding that what they do is so mind-blowing that I appreciate it, because I could never do it. And I think there has to be a certain amount of imagination in science. Because if you're going to come up with a new theory, a new phenomena, you want it to be in a way that is okay for public understanding. So that it's not just science, it's to explain it to everybody. So when we have Newton and his discovery of gravity, they used the apple model. He was sitting under a tree, an apple dropped on his head, and he wondered how that happened. Everybody remembers that story. Then it gives us an understanding of gravity. But if you went and said gravity is the pull of the earth on an object at a particular speed, most people look at you and think, what hieroglyphics are you speaking, right? So I think really it's good we're bringing in the arts, and it's good we're bringing in the D, but the D, like you said, is technology, is design. And in everything we do, there's some beauty in design in it. So science, technology, engineering, maths, the arts, design, it's all to do with the thinking process. And I guess that's why STEM is such a big thing, is because we are quite intentional about our thinking process. Like if you talk about the scientific process, no matter which part of the world you're in, the scientific process stays the same. There's a hypothesis, there's a prediction, there is, methodology, a repetition. Does my data look the same? Is my data precise? Have I chosen the right instruments? And no matter what language you use, it's the same thing, right? So I'm guessing that's probably what this idea of STEAM is trying to do, is to bring in all the facets of what makes STEAM so good.
Interesting. All right. My co-host, do you have any questions at this point? Or any contributions?
I think I for one, I just came by STEAM quite recently. And, I just realized that even educationally, for instance, when I'm applying for STEM programs, they do have funding, they do have scholarship, as opposed to the arts program. And if you need the funding, definitely you go where you get the funding. So I'm just wondering why the A is being downplayed, because as team, we need all the compassionate contingents to come together to make us art. But it feels like for arts, the humanity side is being downplayed. Would you know why that is? Why we more technology, the science, the engineering, and whatnot, and not the arts aspect of it?
That question, I don't even know if I have the answer to it. I can make some suppositions, which is that hierarchy, isn't it? Certain subjects are seen as hierarchically better than others, even within the sciences. So I trained as a science teacher with a biology specialism, and biology is seen as the weaker one of the three sciences. Okay? Irritates the heck out of me, but that's another story. And at one point, probably about 10 years ago in the UK, they started giving scholarships for teachers to train to be chemists and physics teachers, but not to biologists. Guess what happened to biology teacher numbers? Plummeted, right? So if I'm a biochemistry graduate, I'm going to teach chemistry. I'm not going to teach biology. Why would I teach biology? They're not going to pay for my qualifications. So I would rather teach chemistry. So chemistry and physics got a lot of teachers training in it. And now there's a massive, massive problem with biology teachers in the UK because nobody wanted to do it, because I'm not going to get any extra cash for it. So why should I do it? And then, my continued battle was teaching A-level biology, and people would choose it. And every time I had my first batch of A-level biologists, I always ask, why did you choose this subject? And I always get almost like, well, I chose maths, physics, chemistry, and I thought I'll do biology because it's a bit easier, right? You can imagine what my response would be in those situations. And then they get onto the course. So firstly, they've gotten onto the course because they don't really want to do it, but they just thought it would be an easier option. And then they realize the amount of reading and writing they have to do. and then the words, the technical language in biology, and the differences in understanding at, in, on, between, within. Suddenly it's like, okay, this subject is a bit harder than I thought it would be, right? But is that hierarchy? And I think that's what it is that at the top, if you were to rank subjects, it's always going to be the most abstract at the top and the most visual at the bottom. That's basically what it is. So the maths, physics is always at the top, and then being able to draw as they look at it is at the bottom. But there's a huge amount of dimension work in drawing.
Yeah.
You know, how do I draw a massive mural of somebody's face and get the dimensions right so that it looks like a human being? I have to understand some maths. In fact, when I was taught in art, the few things I remember in art is when you're drawing a face, you draw an oval, you divide it in half, and then you do something at the center. And the half is where the eye line is, and the center is where your symmetry comes from. So the nose, the nostrils have to be on either side. Surely that's maths. Is that not maths?
That's maths.
Right? How hard you press your pencil, that's to do with pressure? No. So if you're not relating it, as an art teacher, if you're not relating that, then the children are just thinking we're just sitting here drawing. But actually, there's so many aspects to doing those kinds of things. But we rank because if it's something that we cannot see, it's in our head, it must be hard. Mustn't it? So that's the issue. Really. So that's why I think the arts being brought in is to actually give the arts some value. And I actually like that. Because in some schools, they're kicking out the arts. You know, at a very young age, they're throwing out art, music, dance, PE. Oh, we don't have space on the timetable. Our children's literacy levels are poor. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove one music lesson or one art lesson and put in some more English lessons. So, I mean, I think that's absolutely appalling. But who am I? Yeah. So I think, I mean, I'm quite sad by that. Having said that, some of the very good art institutions, you have to really go through like a real, you know, challenging interviews and processes to get there. I said I went to UCL. We have one of the best arts institutions in probably the whole of UK, the Slade Institute. I think it's even the biggest in Europe, to be honest with you. And the process of getting into the Slade School of Art at UCL is massive. It's very difficult to get into. So there's some exclusivity in certain aspects of art. So maybe over time we will get to understand and give scholarships for any subject. We hope. Let's see how it goes.
Petit à petit, l'oiseau fait son nid. Little by little, the bird will build its nest. So let's see how it goes.
Indeed.
Do you have any more questions, Selinam? Sure.
I think for STEAM, most people find it difficult to marry the concept of STEM and arts. They feel like if you're a science student, engaging in something art related would be a waste of your time, while a science student be playing a drum. That's kind of the concept. People are finding it difficult to put the two together.
To marry the two together.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major problems.
Yeah. I want to cry now when you said what you said.
Tissue.
Honestly. And I actually think we do a disservice with the way we teach subjects and the way we explain things to people. Give me anything and I'll give you the reason why there's science in it. So if you're a drummer, rhythm. How are you getting your rhythm? There's 8 beats, there's 4 beats, there's 2 beats. There's, you know, semi-quavers, quavers, whatever. There's maths in that. Then tone. If I hit really hard, what happens? If I stretch the skin of the drum, what's the sound like? If I squeeze my drum, what do I do to the air in the drum in order for the sound to reverberate differently? We need to do more of that. Okay. So I think that's what it is. It is sometimes not, and a lack of awareness. Science is all around us. We are science. And science is in art. You sit down and you study an artist, their palettes, the way they mix their colors, shades, all of that stuff. That's all science. And also, you're working a different part of your brain. So if you're working a different part of your brain, you are able to make connections even better. right? Some of us, we smell certain things, it reminds us of somebody or something. Why is that? Because the memory is fixed to something. And usually is most of the time it's something beautiful. You smell a perfume or a particular, thing. It evokes a certain kind of memory. And usually when you're doing something that's quite abstract, you're using one part of your brain. I can't remember whether it's left or right. I always mix it up. And then one part you're doing the other. There's a tiny, massive space in the brain that connects the two sides. I'm not a neurologist, so don't quote me. But the idea is that the more you pass things through that one side to the other, the more likely you are to remember it. Why do we use mnemonics and acronyms to learn facts? It's because there's a rhythm to it. We use rhymes to learn. That is music, isn't it? So you need to be able to appreciate that you have, even as a break from the academics, you should have a space where you are being physical or artistic or musing, whichever way you want to look at it, in order to enhance what you're learning in that space. So next time somebody asks you that question or says something like that, give them that answer, right? That the musicality and the arts are all what makes science even more amazing. Seriously, the more you appreciate the arts, the more you appreciate science. You go to the theater, the acoustics is about art, science, right? But you're watching a play or you're watching a musical. In some spaces, the sound just sounds amazing. And you've got acoustic engineers that have worked out how you angle the soundproofing in a space to be able to get the sound heard very easily. That's arts and science, right? So, but how many of your teachers will give you this explanation? Some of us have made a point of learning because children will challenge you. They'll ask you, well, I don't know if they do so in Ghana, but in the UK, they'll ask you questions, why am I doing this? What's the value of this?
Yeah.
So you have to think of a way to make it relevant to them, for them to understand.
Yeah.
I used to do weird things. My children knew me for that. If we're doing botany, we're going out to hug trees. Because without trees, we wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
And they hated it, but they loved it in the same vein. They'll go out and say, hug a tree. Miss, why do we have to do this? Without it, you won't be alive. Miss, no. I said, chop down all the trees and see what happens. Then we have that conversation. If a tree fell down, how many tons of oxygen are we going to lose, etc. And then they begin to understand and appreciate. So I think it's making the learning and the understanding joyous.
Yeah.
Right? And the music teachers also have to push their envelope a bit. Do you have music in Presec?
Yeah.
We praise the Lord for that. Do they do art
Oh,
as well?
Yeah, we do art here.
Yeah.
It will surprise you to know they even had students who were playing violins in the past.
And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think we should never downplay it. And anybody, if I find anyone in any space who's denigrating somebody's talent and art, I always pull them up on it. Because my first question is, can you play the drums? If you're laughing at somebody who can play the drums, can you play the drums? No. So how dare you then say they're not playing the drums? Do you appreciate music? Where do you think the sound comes from? The air? Somebody's having to learn an instrument to be able to play.
Yeah.
Right? So they should. In fact, all research, educational research says there has to be downtime from the academics because it enhances the learning of the academics. In order to do better academically, it's not sitting by your books for a longer period. It's sitting by your books and managing your time well enough to maximize when you're learning. And then your downtime is actually to give you the energy and the strength to go back and maximize your learning again. So those things, I think sometimes we even as parents don't get it right. We make comments and do things that don't really help, So there we go.
With what you said about the theaters, it will surprise you to know that not every kind of chair can be fixed into a theater room, as in a movie theater, I mean. Yeah. To help with the soundproofing, there are certain kind of chairs that have entrapment of sound.
Yes.
The foamy, the cushion kind of chair. So when you enter, let's say, International Conference Center, you see that the chairs there are different from the one we have here in the studio. And it's also different from other places and other halls that you may have across the country. To get, in fact, enter Silverbed, you see what I'm talking about.
Most of them are designed for that.
Exactly. And it's all science. I have a lady friend who's a pharmacist. She was actually my junior in GSS. She's called Dr. Abigail Lutu. I want everyone to check her out at Dr. Abba Otu on Instagram. She does a lot of phenomenal artworks. At Dr. Abba Otu. Check her out, and it will surprise you to know she's a qualified pharmacist. She works and she does a lot of artworks also. Funny enough, her dad was a teacher, so my class 6 teacher at point. So that's it for us to know. And Mommy is right on the issue about we mixing the arts with the science. It helps a lot.
A great deal.
And it will also be like a stress breaker also, and help you to ricochet, go back and do good things. We'll take a short commercial break and we'll come back and wrap it up.
So the world around us, interestingly, has changed a lot, and thanks to technology, and that's why I'm excited, and I would want to recommend you to watch Science Digest show. This is a show that demystifies science and makes our children and everybody as excited about technology and the science around us. And I believe that that is what will make our world a better place for all of us. Keep watching, and I wish you all the best.
Know more about science and demystifying the facts about science, go to Science Digest Show on YouTube or other social media platforms.
I encourage all of you to tune into the Science Digest Show. That's Demystifying Science, and they're on YouTube. You should follow their handle. And like they say, science, yam no fiko fiko.
Science Digest is part of the media partners for this event, and they have awesome content on YouTube. You can try them out. Science Digest, they have a lot of videos explaining some few STEM activities, concepts, and a whole lot. You should try them out. They are on YouTube, they are on Facebook, they are on Instagram.
You are closer than no other.
Many million miracles. We are live on Odadia Radio. Odadia Radio, shine the light. This is still the Science Digest Show. Science Digest Show, demystifying science. Science Digest Show, yamna fiko fiko. And we are proudly supported by SMC Consult, So Much for Christ. We are also supported by EPP Books Services, and then we are also powered live on Odadia Radio. Today on the show has been an interesting time, but I would like to talk about a group called Ubuntu Foundation. Ubuntu Foundation has been doing a lot of social media campaigns, active philanthropic work, and then also health campaigns, amongst other things. And we have Dr. Kwabna Asante J, who is the CEO and founder. Shout outs to him and his team for doing all these works since the year 2015. We'll be wrapping up shortly on today's conversation, the STEM Convo. It's been an interesting time. So last Selinam Amaline, you enjoyed the time, right? Yeah. Love, did you enjoy the moment today?
I was going to make it.
Great. So we'll be wrapping up shortly. We would want to get the concluding words from Madam. Yeah.
See, when you put me in my area of passion, I can talk forever.
Mm-hmm.
So to conclude, I honestly think there's so many facets to what we need to do to move the STEM conversation forward. we talk about it, but usually we don't actually unpick it as to why we're talking about it. Why do we keep insisting on STEM? Why are we now bringing in the arts? Why are there not so many females in the STEM area, etc.? And really, we need to unpick the reasons for it. And I think you can't use what you do for males to be the same that you use for females to get them into the STEM field, because we are brought up differently. Whether we want to or not, we can only make changes in our small little areas as to how girls are brought up. And so the conversation has to be had a bit differently to kind of get the interest where we want it to. I think moving forward with STEM and what we want to do with it, we need to be ready to have conversations in spaces where we're not meant to have conversations, if that makes sense. If you want to discuss STEM, discuss it anywhere. In the kitchen, STEM is happening. You know, on the football field, STEM is happening. So bring those conversations in such a way that people don't even realize the STEM they're discussing. And then maybe we may get there. But our thinking really needs to be, you know, they say, you know, think like you're thinking out of the box.
Okay.
I would say think like there is no box.
Okay, so
there's
no wider space.
There's no restrictions whatsoever. Be ready to listen to whoever is questioning or asking questions. Okay. I think too many times we think age, seniority equals wisdom and know it all. And sometimes even we, the adults, get it wrong. We're not ready to listen to children. Okay. But sometimes the way the children's mind is working, it actually helps us to think differently. Okay. We no longer fix our thought patterns. Because a child will ask you a very peculiar question. It doesn't make any sense. But actually, it's them trying to formulate their own ideas. And I think we need to have those cross-curricular conversations, if, for want of a better expression, in the sense of marrying music with physics and art with biology. And, you know, we had great anatomy drawers and what have you in the old days.
Yeah, letters.
You know, that
anatomy atlas.
That says that, you know, the calligraphy and all of that. That's art in science. You know, so all of those things really need to be brought back to the fore to help us with our learning and understanding. Very, very few people learn abstractly, only abstractly. Most of us have to hang it on to something that makes sense to us. And I think, you know, as Love was asking, is hooking it onto the arts, because art is visual, is there, except for some of the new conventional art, which is a bit far out, but on the whole, it's actually quite visual. And so if you're visualizing abstract concepts, then it makes it easier to understand. So that's what I'll say as my concluding, is the conversation needs to go on, but it needs to become active, so that when we're doing, we're also talking about that conversation and explaining it. That will mean a re-education of we the adults. Because the children, they're malleable. It's we the adults that have to change our thinking patterns to get the STEM going a certain way.
So the STEM agents primarily will be the adults?
Yes, we have to be, because we're the ones that are kind of inculcating certain characteristics in the children. Okay. So we really need to be able to be brave enough to have maybe certain uncomfortable conversations or certain difficult conversations, or even educate ourselves to make the STEM conversation more interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Amazing one. We'll be wrapping up shortly with some shout outs to a lot of people from my co-host and then our guests in the studio. But belated happy Father's Day to all fathers. And then also Sharks quiz just ended, and congratulations to all participating schools and to the winners. Presbyterian Boys Secondary School, shine the light as always. In their light we shall see light. On stage they had Kwabna Amponsa Henyo, who was in there for primarily English. We had Ni Lakote Otu for general knowledge, GK, Benedict Pate Dote for math, and then Jermaine Jimadankwa for science, and then Oliver Tremantin also for GK. Congratulations to the whole Sharks Quiz team of Presbyterian Boys School and all other participating schools. I think, Quiz Mistress, you have something to say at this point.
Oh, yes. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. The auditorium yesterday was electric. You had to be there to kind of feel it. You know, you were there. So absolutely beautiful competition. I love the way the Sharks kind of just doesn't try and stick with just science and maths and kind of brings in other stuff. We had a conversation. I think that's how I ended up in the studio.
Yeah.
And it was very much what Love was saying is, why don't we have enough females? Because the last 4 teams were all male schools. And we started this conversation, and I was telling him, in fact, is the way we train our girls need to change. And then that conversation started, and he was like, you need to come to the studio. That's how I ended up here today. But I would, as a female scientist, if I can call myself such, would love to see more young ladies in the quizzing field. It doesn't necessarily have to, because Sharks is not really about science only, but to see them, become much more able to deal with adversity, because quiz processing is it can be very much adverse, and sometimes we females tend to over emotionalize it. And maybe that's why we need to do some work to get them to be in these final stages of these quiz competitions. In the juniors, we had many more females.
Yeah.
So I was definitely smiling there. But that's what I'll say. In the seniors, I'd like to see more. It was, like I say, I won't denigrate anything that happened yesterday. It was absolutely amazing. Some of these kids gobsmacked me with their knowledge. But yeah, we need to do more with our girls to get them in that same space.
Interesting.
That's a different conversation, I think.
I know, right?
In all honesty, yeah.
The Yasantua movement will continue.
Yes, and I'm from Ejuso, so you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen there.
All right, Love. Any shout outs for us, please?
I'll shout out to everyone listening. Shout out to everyone trying to. You're learning mechanism. I hope you find it. Good luck. Shout out to everybody else. They also had
Hene.
God bless you all.
Sure. Selinam, any shout outs?
Yeah, that would be to my parents and siblings.
Okay.
To the members of the Prosec Science and Mars and Sharks Quiz teams.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. All right. Quiz mistress.
I guess I'll say the same thing. Sharks Quiz team.
Okay.
I really love the experience of quizzing there, for sure. Abel Ohiniakwe, who's our executive director of the whole thing, his energy amazes me. And long may he continue. I think it's an amazing thing. Yeah. Be it with me, be it without me, I think it needs to keep going. He's doing something different in a different space, and I think that's absolutely amazing. In all honesty, my prayer and what I will continue to devote my strength to is to make education fun in Ghana. I think we've lost the FUN in education. We've made it too serious, too much about certificates and collecting qualifications, and very little about the learning. And so that's my prayer. So my shout out is to the educators who are doing different things in their spaces. And it's quite a few. We belong to the STEM network, and there's some amazing things going on in that space. So that's what I will work for. Big shout out to my wonderful daughter, who joined me in Ghana supposedly for a year and is now stuck. She loves it here. And being untypically African, she's actually making her money in Ghana in dance, although her degree was in anthropology and African studies. Okay. So she definitely is beating going against the grain of what we're doing. Her name is SEA, big time. We'll have to explain that in a different light. And to anyone who knows me, my face is known in many spaces, but just that those who know me know where my heart lies and what my values are and what I want to do. And so all I can say is we pray for strength to continue to do what we want to do. And so shout out to the world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Ubuntu Foundation can be found on Instagram at Ubuntu Foundation _ and then on the phone number 024 832098. That is 0240 832098. 0240 832098. Science Digest show is 3 years old this year. Yes, and we have a new project on the block, which is the Science Road Show, where we'll be going to schools and taking science to their doorstep. STEAM or STEM or steamed, all of it, totality of it. And we have t-shirts that we've branded and we are making, and we've made some out already. You can sponsor us with any amount on the number 054-859-3815. 054-859-3815. Just hit us up. You can send us your donations through. Also, Odadia Radio has supported us so much on our journey. EPP Books, shout out to all of them. And we would wrap up shortly. But before we do that, we'll say this on the show. Science Digest Show. Yam no fiko fiko. So this is what we do.
Yam no fiko fiko.
Yam no fiko fiko. So see you next time on the show. Ala prochaine fois. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.